And so we're watching it and we were just like, wow, this movie's super dark.
Yeah.
We forgot how dark and terrifying it was.
No wonder I've always loved it.
But
I have my notes.
yeah.
It starts with "Hello 1980s."
Yeah.
And then, oh, look, she kind of looks like Anna Green Gables. And then, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? They showed this to us as kids. What the fuck?
Yep.
I don't think I saw it as well, not as a little kid, but like I think I saw it maybe in my teens. And then I was like, holy crap, I never knew this existed. This is the best thing ever.
No, I saw this as a kid. This was
Me too.
And watching it again was like, oh, this is where I got that nightmare.
Man, the second the Wheelers made that sound.
Oh,
no.
Oh yeah. The Wheelers were like, they're so terrifying.
They're so creepy. I don't know what it is about the sounds they make and the long limbs and the way they're just always laughing. It just
okay.
And the masks, the helmet masks
properly.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, we're just like trauma dumping right at the beginning of the episode.
Hi, friends.
Hello and welcome.
Hello. Thanks for being here.
And welcome to Not Muppet Sex and Trauma. I am here with Mainly Mandy and Zylla. We are talking about the Nightmare Fuel 1985 film that haunted my dreams, Return to Oz. and I have written a bit of a summary.
I can't wait for the summary. How do you summarize this movie exactly?
Return to Oz was written by Gil Dennis and Walter Murch, who also directed the film. Dorothy is home, but home is not what it once was. She can't sleep, and no one believes her fantastical story even when she finds a key linked to Oz. Her concerned Aunt Em takes Dorothy to an asylum where a stern nurse and a bearded doctor attempt to give her electroshock therapy. Just then a storm hits and a strange girl frees Dorothy. Lost in a storm-swelled river, Dorothy wakes to find herself in Oz with talking chicken Billina. But Oz is not what it once was. The land is deserted except for a strange wheeled creatures, a wind-up man named Tick-Tock, and the head-swapping Princess Mombi, who traps Dorothy in a tower. Dorothy escapes with the help of Billina, Tick-Tock, new friend Jack Pumpkinhead, and a cobbled-together flying couch elk thingy called Gump. Dorothy and friends fly to the mountain home of the Gnome King, who is actually responsible for all this, and who has her ruby slippers. And he's also holding her old friend Scarecrow hostage. The Gnome King has transformed Scarecrow into part of his tchotchke collection, and he makes a deal with Dorothy that each of her friends has one turn to guess which is the Scarecrow transformed knickknack. Guess the right one, and he'll set them free. Guess wrong, and they'll become part of the collection. Each of them is wrong, except Dorothy, who begins to free her friends. The Gnome King is incensed and tries to eat her friends, but a panicked Billina lays an egg which he swallows instead. Turns out he's allergic and crumbles to dust, freeing all of Oz. The people of Oz are so grateful they want to make Dorothy queen, but she is able to free their true queen, Ozma, who looks remarkably like the girl who freed her from the asylum, and who sends Dorothy back to Kansas with the promise that she may visit as she chooses. Auntie Em and Uncle Henry are excited to have Dorothy home and tell her that the asylum burned down with the doctor who resembled the Gnome King and the nurse who's now gone to jail. This time Dorothy decides maybe she'll keep this adventure to herself.
That was really good. No, that's pretty succinct. It doesn't really capture the full scope of the what the fuckness, because you can never do that simply, but it's still very good.
All of that filtered through a large amount of acid and gin and spring creation. So yeah, initial thoughts other than what the fuck?
I love this movie so dang much. This is like when I discovered, I was saying earlier, when I discovered this movie, I was like, you've been hiding the goth from me. Like, this is what my life needed. But I also didn't see it when I was like a little kid. I was somewhere in my teens.
In your teens, yeah. I bet that's a very different experience because like Sara and I have both said that we saw it when we were kids. So like my impression of this movie was like, this is a scary, dark movie in the same way that like The Dark Crystal is as well. Like there's something very uncomfortable about it, but I loved it as a kid. Like I ate it up and I remember watching it multiple times. There are definitely things about it that I didn't catch as an adult, like the whole, they're going to give Dorothy electric shock therapy. Like I did not pick that up as a kid. And that adds a different layer to it now as an adult. But yeah, there's just something about this genre of film that is just perfect for me. And this is why I'm into horror movies now.
Yeah, it's very funny to me because I'm very not into horror movies.
Oh, really?
Like horror movies, my brain tends to take, like, I don't love the feeling of watching them in the first place, but that's okay. But then like I have nightmares that are way worse than the movie. And so that can happen with other things, you know, because like this is perfect nightmare fuel, like Sara was saying. I'm shocked that it didn't happen, but I love stuff like this and Dark Crystal and Labyrinth that are just like on the edge of scary, but like fairy tale scary.
Yeah. It's very Brothers Grimm.
Yeah, I'm kind of selective because I love the stuff that's on the edge. I was too young for this when I watched it. And the thing is, it wasn't I loved the fairy tale side of things. It was everything in the real world that gave me nightmares.
With good reason. With good reason. That asylum was scary as heck, and those things were real.
And the creepy doctor being like, look, it has a face. What the fuck?
Like trying so hard to be relatable to kids when you clearly are just not. And Dorothy just being like, I'm supposed to smile and nod, so I'm gonna smile and nod.
And the nurse, that scared me a hell of a lot. The head swapping thing scared me a bit, but really it was all that, you know, there's sort of like, if things are in a fantasy world, that's different. Because I watched The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and stuff at a bit more of an older age, more appropriate, and I love it. I love weird and fantastical, and I love monsters, but gore, I can't with gore. I can't with horror that's too real, because I can have intrusive thoughts, and my brain is very visual. So it's like it will repeatedly show me the scary images, so I try not to have them in my head, even if I like the story. So yeah, I'm kind of picky about what sort of like, I love goth and dark romance and dark fairy tales, but I draw the line when there's like gore of any kind. This is like, this is very much that's where that nightmare came from.
Yeah.
Because I was a very anxious kid, so like, why were they showing this? Never mind.
Just our parents have a lot to answer for.
The real question is, did they show you Watership Down?
No, I saw that.
Because if they showed you Watership Down, they're monsters.
I saw Watership Down for sure.
Oh gosh.
No, what they showed me, because they tended to, dad's movie tastes were always the ruling thing rather than thinking about what kids want. So what actually gave me nightmares as a kid was the opening scene in Amadeus.
Oh, really?
Where where Salieri tries to kill himself and there's blood everywhere, and it's all like
yeah,
what? Why were you showing that to a kid? It's culture, because it's Mozart.
Right. It's totally fine. It's historical. Historical gore doesn't count.
Yes, because in the past, things were never absurd and political and violent like they are now. Right.
Oh boy. Yeah. there were so many things about this movie I found scary as a kid, and I find still honestly kind of scary now. Like I do find the whole face swapping thing very scary. Like when all the heads are like screaming, that scene always got to me. And then like the headless body like coming at her like a fucking vampire. Like oof, like the whole thing is super unnerving. And then I also, like I said before to both of you, I find the Wheelers really scary. Like those noises they make is like I still hate that sound of like a really squeaky wheel, and the laughing and just the way they move. There's just something about it that makes me so uncomfortable. And I also found the settings scary, like the desert, that they can't touch the sand or you turn into sand. And like it's just I don't know. My imagination just really goes wild with this movie, and it's so wild to look back and be like, yeah, some of these nightmares I still have to this day might have been partially inspired here.
Yeah, I have to say that the Deadly Desert is definitely one of those sort of things that has become implanted in my brain as like worst case scenario kind of nightmares. Just, but that also makes me think about one of the things that I absolutely adore about this movie, which is the special effects.
Yeah.
Because when those Wheelers turn to sand, it is like perfect. It's perfect.
It's great.
And like the claymation that they do with like the door in the Gnome King's palace. Holy crap.
And the faces in the rock moving around.
Yes. Oh, so cool. Good.
And the Gnome King's transition from
rock to human. There's so much in this that they just like lightly touch on and then go away from. And that's one of those things of like, you don't notice at first that with every ornament, he's becoming more humanoid. And then by the time that Mombi gets there, he's like just a person clothed in rocks. And it's like, whoa. Why do you want to be human, though? You're the Gnome King.
That is the question, isn't it? Yeah, and then you really notice it when it goes backwards and he starts like almost devolving. Like, it's so well done, the practical effects. And of course the puppetry in it is really great too. All the puppets look amazing. All the animatronics, like the chicken looks so good.
Yeah, like there are some scenes where it's clearly an actual chicken and there are some scenes where it's clearly an animatronic chicken, but they go together seamlessly.
So
like you only notice if you're looking for it.
Yeah, the eyes at one point is kind of freaky and haunted. But I did some research on the background, and there were 30 chickens.
30 chickens.
Because
that's a lot of chickens.
Each of them had different had like there were chickens that were good at doing one thing, and there were chickens that were good at doing the other thing. And because Firuza was so small, she couldn't carry a full-size chicken, so they had to have like a little chicken.
Oh wow.
That's so cute.
Also, so holy crap, Firuza Balk. Like I did not realize this was her breakout. That's very cool.
It's so cool, isn't it? I love her in this.
Is it because she's so associated in my head with like
the craft?
Well, but also just like weird and violent and witchy and like quasi villain goth chicks. Not necessarily just the craft, because honestly, like there's that gif that keeps circulating around from the water boy. It's just her holding up the sign. Do you want me to kill them? like that image is in my head when I think of Firuza Balk.
Yeah, I always forget that isn't Nancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also she's the weird cat lady in
Island Dr.
Moreau, which is one of the most fucked up pieces of cinema I've ever seen.
It's so weird. That is a weird ass movie. That's a whole other conversation there. But yeah. I always think of her. I usually think of The Craft, but I also think of that movie of her because her performance in that is like, she's weird cat lady. I mean, I mean, I think she did well. It's just a weird movie.
Well, it's a weird story. Yeah. Not that I know anything about the movie, but if y'all want to show it to me at some point, I'm game.
Yeah, we
Next
should do that as a weird movie night. We should do The Island of Dr. Moreau because it is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the chicken is really good. Jack, the pumpkin head, his like he's so expressive. Like there are times you can tell that they had an actual something in the pumpkin to make like the whole head kind of move, which was really well done. All the gump, the big moose couch.
They did such a good job with his face.
Yeah,
like it's just like a weird green moose face, but you totally forget that they don't have CGI to make his mouth do things.
Yeah,
like it just looks good.
Part of why it makes a good a Farscape adjacent is because it's puppetry.
Puppets.
Mm-hmm. In fact, did you recognize the voice of Jack the Pumpkinhead?
No.
Sounded kind of familiar, but I couldn't place it.
Brian Henson.
Ah, okay.
Ew.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Cute.
Since we're talking about Gump, can we just talk about how Caption Boy and I found this so funny. They create him to escape. And then as they're flying, Gump asks them all these questions about, why am I alive? And they're saying, oh, we made you so we could escape. And I said to Chris, can you imagine if you could speak to God? And that's what God told you? We made you so we could escape. This is your purpose.
and then Gump, like once the body falls apart, he's just like, nope, just leave me here. I'm just gonna be a head without a body. I don't. And they tie him to the couch, and then he's the first one that gets turned into an ornament, and he's just like, I should have quit while I was ahead. And he's like, you tried.
You tried so many times, man.
oh, poor Gump.
Poor Gump.
That has to be one of the best dumb jokes in the whole film. I should have quit while I was ahead.
Poor green moose guy.
Yeah, he was the best. I feel like everything he said could be turned into a millennial meme. Or just so many good things he said. It was cracking me up so much. I fell for him, poor guy.
Yeah, well, he was born in 1985, so he's a millennial.
He is. Yep. He's one of us.
Whereas TikTok, man, TikTok is definitely a boomer.
He is.
Yeah, every time he takes a step. Speaking of amazing puppet work. Oh man. So good. And like again with just the really expressive with minimal face work with the mustache and the eyes that blink, and then his hat gets beat up and
yeah.
And he's so proud of not being alive, even though I forgot that they didn't make him alive. I thought, oh, well, they have the powder of life. Of course, they're gonna make him live.
Nope, they never did. But that's okay. He was
and honestly good for them.
Yeah,
like
he was happy.
Way more consent based than the Gump.
And I like that he has a sort of like built-in mechanic that makes, even though he's like a powerful fighter, he has like a built-in weakness being that his gears will eventually run out. Like that's like a fun mechanic to have for a character. You don't really hear something like that. It's like his version of, I don't know, spinach or something to power up. Like I like that. That's cool. And they play with that a little bit in the movie.
Yeah, and the whole joke about how he can keep going when his brain isn't working. But haven't you seen people like?
Mm-hmm.
See, he is a boomer.
He is a boomer.
Yeah. When he starts spouting gibberish because his thinking has run out.
Yeah.
But his speaking is still on, and it's like, oh, you sound a little familiar, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And they got one of those old English actors who did war films to voice him.
Oh, is he?
I love that he is the Army of Oz. He's not just like part of the Army of Oz. He is the Army of Oz. It's great. It's great. Like I know that's from the books, And many things in here are from the books.
Yeah.
Not necessarily any one book, but many things here are from somewhere in the books.
I was going to ask you too if you've read the books. I've never read the books.
A long time ago, but yes.
Yeah, a long time ago. I don't remember them very well. I also watched the cartoon that was made out of this.
Oh,
there's a cartoon. Oh my god.
Yeah, there's a cartoon. Is
it terrible?
Yes.
Yes.
It's very 1980s fever dream, kind of 70s looking. I remember it as being sepia, although the internet tells me it was color. There's actually,
I might look on the internet and see if I can find it.
Yeah, there's actually been a number of Oz-based cartoons. Yeah, but I was very young, so it's sort of like half remember bits and pieces. But I did remember the Pumpkinhead Man.
I actually had forgotten the Pumpkinhead Man. And I think it's because him calling Dorothy mom makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
but there's
so
something like
uncomfortable.
Kind of sweet about it too.
Oh yeah, like
way.
it's and he doesn't like he asks if it's okay and she says yes and she finds it sweet. And so because she finds it sweet, it's a little sweet, but it's also and like even as a kid, I knew I didn't want kids, and the idea of like something inhuman that I created on a whim deciding to call me mom, I just was like, kill it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think also it's partially like it's so uncomfortable to see a small child being like placed with the responsibility of an adult, which is so much of what Dorothy goes through in this movie. Like she has to be the adult. She's the one that's like has the plan. Like she has help and that's great, but like she's functionally the adult most of the time or going up against other adults. Like almost as like they're equals, and it's just so uncomfortable. She's a little girl. You want to pick her up and protect her, So for her to have to be called mom, it's like
in rewatching this, I watched it with two of my close friends, and one of them was pointing out that in The Wizard of Oz, you have a Dorothy Gale being played by someone who's older than the role, and that gives you a way better performance. Not that Fruz Balk is not good here, but she's definitely a child actor. But like, that Dorothy Gale is iconic and striking, but also like this Dorothy Gale is just so visibly a child.
Yeah.
Like so very much like the image of childhood. With those bright blazing eyes that she's known for.
And she looks like Anne of Green Gables, actually.
She does.
Just not redheaded. Actually, the mummy thing didn't bother me too much because, like, I'm used to like my nibblings will, like, call their toys. My nieces will call their toys their babies, and like one of them was telling me that like I am the great aunt of this giraffe thingy. So I was seeing it in that sort of way. I mean, the toys obviously don't talk back, but this is like a kid's dream where the toys talk back and the toys call her mommy. And like, she's like, it is the thing about this is so much of it is like the way the way a child sees the world. Because I was thinking about like the whole thing with the replaceable heads. And it is very much like Dorothy has seen the scary nurse lady show one face to her aunt and one face to the doctor and one face to her. It's like this is like a child literalizing that in their imagination. It's like the scary lady that has multiple heads. And people don't usually see the real one, but Dorothy has to defeat her. And then the weird scary man who tries to be friendly to a child, but it is clearly a serious threat, she sees as the Gnome King. And all the orderlies have turned into the wheelies, and it's that sound
the sound of the
gurneys. And so, yeah, it's like this even more than Judy Garland, this is a kid's reimagining of the world. This is her and her stuffies and the imagined cobbled together toy couch thing that kids tend to, it's like a kind of fort thing going up against, and they're helping her, trying to overcome the adult problems in that the adults that in reality she wouldn't be able to overcome, but in her fantasy world she can. Yeah, whereas the Wizard of Oz 1939, it doesn't have quite the same, like, a child's imagining of the world. It's a much more refined story in a lot of ways. You know, the plantings and payoffs are spectacular, and when Danny and I discussed it for this, we got a whole lot into, like, the queer theory of it, and we ended up talking about Over the Rainbow for half of it. And, like, the dream of an outsider trying to find a place, which is a very different thing from a child trying to cope with the world by imagining it in a fairy tale way, trying to cope with the horrors of the world. Not only was Judy Garland older than the role, and that Dorothy was older than this Dorothy, and set in a different time. Judy Garland also had this sense of being already an adult because of all the shit that she'd been through. And so she has that sort of very much cusp of adult and child, adultified child thing, that she is eternally the child on the verge of becoming an adult, encapsulated in this way that she has always been. And so she is always sort of that, I think, kind of that Arrested Development queer time thing. And whereas Fairuza Balk's Dorothy is a child.
Very much so. And a child who cannot deal with the adult things. Because they do talk about a lot of real issues in the real world part of this, which there's more of than I remembered watching it. Like, there's the real consequences of losing your house in a natural disaster, the real consequences of living on the edge of poverty, the threat to Bellina's life that Dorothy is aware of is because they can't afford to feed a chicken that isn't producing eggs because they're not well off. The consequences of having somebody's leg hurt and then having that recover, the real sort of tension of not being able to give that person space to mentally and emotionally heal because your house isn't finished and winter is coming. And the they talk about money in this way that's very familiar and very scary, right? Like, can they accept charity? What are they going to do? How are they going to pay for things? If Dorothy can't sleep, then she isn't as helpful as she should be, and that's a problem, but they don't want to blame her because they know it's not her fault. And so there's this newfangled thing that might help her. Maybe we'll take her there. And then it turns out to be electroshock therapy, which, by the way, bad idea. We still have those, and I don't approve. Don't approve. We should not have those. Those are bad.
No, we should not.
Apparently, there's some good evidence for it when it's used in very specific ways with, what they do now is worlds away from just randomly running electricity through the brains of someone who is conscious. So, like, that's
good.
It's a complicated. There's a complicated discussion for today because sometimes it does help with certain mental health problems that are resistant to medication. But the difference of the way it is done today with the way it was done there is the difference between a craniotomy and an ice pick lobotomy. The surgery versus a sledgehammer. So yeah, you do not run electricity through the brain of a 6-year-old child.
Like that. Yeah, like it's just thinking about that. Like if that's not that much older than my oldest nephew. Like that's just terrifying to think about.
That's younger than my nibblings.
I was a little bit shocked that her stories of Oz were so much of a problem for her. Because if I, at that age, had come to my mom talking about this fantasy world that I had invented, she would have been like, okay, honey, do you want to write a book or something? It's kid. It's a kid.
Yeah, which is where it makes a difference the time that it's set in, because it was even at the time that the books were published, there were people who banned them because the idea of encouraging children to imagine things was seen as bad for kids, or it was seen as irreligious.
That I believe.
Imagining a life different than what you have. And it's very
certainly dangerous to fascists.
Yeah, and also to the sort of evangelical shit that the Victorians were doing. To a certain segment, there, Victorian times was very split, and this I think is even Edwardian. It's very split between sort of libertines and fundamentalists. Not unlike, it's a perennial
Other
thing.
Relevant times.
but yeah, like the division between Oscar Wilde and Harvey Kellogg. And tent the world of days long tent revivals and snake charmers and anything imaginary is like signs of the devil. So yeah, I think there's Alice in Wonderland might pop back from her dreams, and her neighbor goes, "Hey, I'm gonna write this down as a book." Whereas Dorothy Gale in Kansas is like, let's take you to the doctor. It's sort of like these things can coexist at the same time in different worlds and different kinds of adults.
Or rural Kansas. This is exactly where there's not space. Either you have complete freedom where the city rules aren't holding you down, or you have very traditional folks who don't have time for what's new and what's changing. They're just doing their best. Things are not great in rural Kansas at that time.
Not that they were great in the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, but
right. Yeah. That's the thing is we're talking about time periods in which there was probably very little recourse for somebody stuck with having their house blown down in a tornado or whatever. With all of these big adult problems that a child just cannot handle. I was just especially thinking about how much this movie, much more so than the 1939 movie or the books, treats it very much as if it could be made up. There's so many parallels with the same actor playing the doctor and the Gnome King, the same actress playing the nurse and the real head of Mombi, the orderly playing the Wheelers. it's very much meant to feel that way. And like even TikTok is a mechanical face that has to be wound up, like the little electric shock machine. Yeah. Which it's kind of funny that she sees that as a friend. But like, it very much still could be that this is like, it's kind of set up that this is her dream on being knocked out into the raging river.
Mm-hmm.
And not, as it was in the books, a very literal adventure where she can take other people along. Like in the later books, she takes like Uncle Henry along and they go traveling around with the wizard.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. They go strange places. Like there's one point they go into the center of the earth and meet a kingdom of vegetable people or something, and I don't know, it gets weird. Is what I'm saying, and not necessarily in the fun way.
Children's literature broadly is weird.
But honestly, like this movie, I think to me captures that same sort of in-between spirit that you get with something like, it's a Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean movie that is not Coraline.
Mirror Mask?
Mirror Mask. Thank you. Yes.
I got you.
Where it's like kind of unclear whether that really happened or not. And like kind of famously, Neil Gaiman, necessary in parentheses, like, and Dave McKean disagree on whether it's real or not.
Mm.
Oh, really?
Yes, this podcast does not support Neil Gaiman, who is a shithead, but he did write some good books. Yeah.
I would also say it's kind of reminiscent the way that Labyrinth has because like there's a lot of things you see like in Sarah's room before she goes to the labyrinth that you're like, oh, you're going to see this later, you're going to see this later. So there's that same kind of ambiguity there. I think the movie kind of leans more on the side in that one on the case of like, yeah, it's probably real, but you could probably argue either way. So like, yeah, there's something about this particular genre of film that tends to lend itself to like these very more obvious parallels between the real world and this magical, maybe real, maybe not world. And it's almost like if it's a dream, then it's just like, okay, it's just the mind of a child or a young adult just grabbing these things and making sense of them in this magical way, in this magical sort of thinking way. Or maybe it is real, but they almost like the way the magical world is affected is from the child's subconscious outward, which is it's an interesting concept. It's like, oh, you bring something to this magical world and it shapes itself around you. And that's a really cool idea. Kind of terrifying because there's all kinds of weird things in this brain. I don't know what would pop out from there if I could shape reality with it. But like that's really cool. It's really cool.
There's a whole genre of webcomic that are about this kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think they definitely borrowed that it's a dream thing from the 30s film, but without, hitting it so hard as the 30s film does. Yeah. But I think there's sort of a evolution of childhood literature and even just childhood and in the sort of from the books to the movies, the various things, because like childhood is a Victorian invention. There were always, small developing humans, but they didn't tend to be thought of as this separate kind of person. They tended to be treated as like small humans who might die. Not that like people did have, pedagogy, but in the sort of like hegemonic culture rather than, individual families. And especially as, in the industrial world, in the agrarian world, they had been, part of the farm laboring and, brought in that way. But in once you had sort of industrial world and cities, then some of them went to work and some of them but the affluent ones, they sort of invent this childhood thing which is more like less invention and more like discovering how kids seem to be. And then we get into like children's literature is a Victorian invention. Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan and The Wizard of Oz, and sort of understanding that kids have this world and this way, this internal world, and the way of sort of learning to understand the world. People were actually interested in how kids learn and what kids do. And so because the stories that we tell build the culture, we then have, by the time the 30s, we've actually got some children's literature stories. We've got like the Alice in Wonderland, It's a Dream thing that gets brought into The Wizard of Oz, and then The Wizard of Oz changes the culture so much. And then we have this film in the 1980s when we have like dark fantasy and the and we have like the Henson Company as well as Disney and all these more fantastical things. And we also have more understanding of how kids live and process the world and how kids think. And so, and an understanding that sometimes kids have dark ideas too. So we have like the darkness, and then which I think more recently there's less dark things for kids. There's a lot more sort of twee, because part of the interesting part of the Victorian thing was the idea of children as like blank slates and like angelic things, especially they had a weird thing about angelically dying children.
And that very much feeds into simultaneously the concept of fantasy and imagination as something you put away when you become an adult, which has, I think, been dreadfully harmful. And also leads to the sort of backwards protect the children impulse that you see a lot, where, we can't possibly expose our children to the realities of the world, and so they don't think they can do any harm.
Yeah.
But they can. And like, I hate to keep coming back to the Christo-fascists of the world, but like this is unfortunately something that I have to think about a lot these days. Which, just to be clear, is not all Christians, because I know that people will sometimes take it that way. If you are a healthy person, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about people like, the Duggars or something, who are way out there on the fringes doing their best to strip all education and freedom from their own and their children's lives, and everybody else's if they can.
The natalist movement.
Yeah.
They're all about making more children and
building a white army for Christ.
Yes.
Yep.
That's not even an exaggeration. Yeah, that's what quiverful means, by the way. That's what it means. What was I talking about? ADHD has gotten me down this track.
Yeah, but you're making me think of the idea of reproductive futurism.
Oh, yes.
The idea that we must protect the child. And it is this kind of a neo-Victorian idea of the perfect child. The child is this perfect, like angelic, innocent being that cannot come into any contact with the reality of the world until they suddenly turn into the adult who is going to reproduce more children, because it's always about the reproductive potential of the child.
Yeah, that's not traumatic for anybody.
Yeah, and they throw real children under the bus constantly because this is the thing where they like don't want to have sex ed or teach kids about anything. And so you have real children who don't have the words to say that an adult is abusing them.
Yeah. Or children who unknowingly hurt people by repeating the things that they hear their elders say, but they have no idea that racism still exists, for example. Like, they just don't know because they've never been told about it. They've never been told that these things are real, that people can be hurt by their words.
Right. Yeah, because the sort of censorship and wanting to sort of erase queerness from public spaces because it's like so more inherently sexual than straight relationships. You might grow up in an environment where, children aren't having access to those kind of lives, like seeing people who are queer and understanding it, being taught it in sex ed. Like, I was not taught in my sex ed anything about how queer sex work. I was taught penis go in vagina, woman get pregnant, don't get pregnant because you're a teenager and you'll die. You know what I mean? Like, that was my sex ed. There was nothing about queerness in there at all. There was no talking about, trans people or anything like that. So like, Central Maine in the 90s
people do die of despair and of hurting themselves because they aren't taught how it's possible to be a whole person.
Yeah, there's this terrifying story I've heard where a child, the stupid thing about not teaching children the real words for things, she kept referring to her cookie and didn't understand why her uncle was touching her cookie. And people were saying, well, no, you're supposed to share your cookies. And they didn't realize she was talking about her vagina.
Yeah.
She was being abused, but because they had protected her from having the real words, they had failed to protect her from being able to say that she was being hurt.
Right. Because she wasn't taught to say the word vagina. It wasn't said, my genitals are being touched. That, like, it's like, oh, we can't teach the children these words. No, we have to teach them these words. That's going to protect them. That's going to help them get help. And
we have to teach them that trans people exist.
Yes.
That queer people exist. Yeah. Not because it will turn them queer, because that doesn't happen.
Right.
Trust me, if I could be more queer, I would be.
The kid just ends up being like, something is wrong with me.
And sometimes that means they don't make it to adulthood. And that's not okay.
Yeah. Like, I didn't have the words for bisexual when I was little, but I also didn't have the words for autism and didn't really know that was a thing that girls could be. So, like, I think back since, diagnosing myself, and I recognize all these times of like this sense that there is something wrong with Sara being taken to all these psychiatrists and counselors and all this thing and all these, having all these meetings where adults are trying to figure out what's wrong with me and why I'm not pulling my bootstraps up. And, it's sort of never ending, like, sense that there was something wrong with me. But I didn't have the words to say, like some of the, and that's just simple things like, I'm being overwhelmed by too much stimulus, or I don't like this texture of this thing, or whatever. Like I don't understand why the adults are putting on this fake face for guests and stuff. I don't understand why they change. Which is kid not understand, that's an autistic kid's not understanding the word. So it's like, but why is everybody lying? And it's just like, if you don't, and those were like the adults in my world were doing their best mostly with not having the information that they needed, because it was the 1980s. But sometimes there's adults deliberately not giving kids information, or sometimes we're just not putting the resources into getting kids the education. But if you don't teach kids about stuff, they'll just end up wondering, something is wrong with me.
Which is the messaging that Dorothy is getting. Something is wrong with me, and I'm supposed to be a good little girl and not talk about it.
And something is wrong with that nurse. and her she, how is she supposed to articulate when her aunt told her to listen to what the nurse said?
And because of the time that we live in, there's this sort of metatextual read in the movie that we get that Dorothy and the people that live in that time don't have, which is that we can look back and go, oh, that's electric shock therapy on a child. We know what that can do. We understand how dangerous that is. So yeah.
That's actually one thing that kind of bugs me about this movie is, did that nurse actually do anything wrong? Was there actually anything wrong with her?
So, okay. I was thinking about this too with Chris last night because I think
she gets carted away in the police wagon, but why?
I think it's just because like she's there. Like the guy that actually runs the hospital, he died apparently in the fire. They say he ran back in. So she's all that's left there for accountability. But like, yeah, how much power did she actually have there?
And also, like, if this is regarded at the time, which it was, as like the best curative technology they have, this is a totally legal and accepted form of practice. The screaming was implied very much to be part of Dorothy's particular imagination. Nobody was found dead in the basement where all the screaming was coming from
that we know of.
Well, right, but like nothing was reported on that. And when we have that terrifying scene of the nurse chasing them to the river, she's yelling at them to stop, and she's so upset that they fell in the river that she tries to go after them herself.
Does try to save
she
them.
is trying to save them from dying, which we get an implication that the blonde girl did.
Yeah. It's hard to know because you could read it as she's trying to stop them running away. She's trying to stop them getting away, or you can read it as she's trying to save them from drowning. It's totally ambiguous, but of course, we're going to blame the woman at the end of the film.
Yeah, but like there's no in-universe reason for her to be carted away in the police wagon.
Yeah, we're not told. Which again is kind of a kid's way of seeing the world, because how often are you not told?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there might be more context that she doesn't have, and because of that, we don't have either. But I do think like within this universe, within the logic of the movie, I do think the nurse is actually like well-intentioned as much as you can be in this with all the context. You know what I mean? Because I think she is ultimately doing a job that she thinks is going to help this child.
She reminds me of an ABA therapist.
Yeah.
She genuinely believes that she is helping children.
Yeah. But is doing something that we know now is like, hey, whoa, there's a lot to would say this is bad. And I do think that she's, when you see her face, when she's standing there in the water watching Dorothy like float away and the other little girl, she does look like genuinely heartbroken. Like, it's not like she wants dead children on her hands. Like, even if she is, not very friendly in that scene with Dorothy and the way she acts with her, like, you don't get the set. Like, you cannot like children or be snappy with children and not want them dead, obviously. Like, that's not what that means. So, like, I definitely have this
as someone who is child-free by choice and does not particularly get along with most kids, I don't want them dead. Right. I just want them to be with someone who likes kids, them.
But yeah, I the ones I don't, it's okay. Like, yeah. So like I think she is as well-intentioned a character as possible. And it is interesting that at the end she's in that police wagon. You're like, okay, why? Because like I don't want to say she didn't do anything wrong, but like what in the context of the movie did she ultimately do wrong?
See, I do get a sinister sense because I think, possibly the screaming was real. But it's that moment where she, the way that she acts towards Dorothy when she's strapping her into the bed, that I just get such a sense of sinister. There is something fucked up there. I don't know what it is. And I don't think Dorothy knows what it is, but I get the sense that this is scary lady. The danger, danger, danger. And maybe it's because I've just seen too many things about institutions and the scary teacher, scary nurse kind of person that I'm just like,
yeah,
danger, 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 danger. Just in the in the way that she looks at her.
It's not false. It's not false.
But we don't get text. It's left to be interpreted. Yeah, and even if she is Nurse Ratched, likely doing anything she does on the orders of the guy, and he of course escapes accountability, by being dead, but still, not surprisingly, the man escapes accountability. And yeah, it would have been. It is a bit. There is a lot of loose writing in this film that it's very cool and very interesting as a film, but it's also like there's a lot of, in terms of story structure, there's a lot of free floating loose ends and things that aren't tightened up, and sort of a lot of it. It's we know that they're afraid of chickens the whole time, but it is like holy ex chicken ex eggy ex machina as a way to get out of the climax of the film. We do have a setup that the chicken has not been laying eggs. We do get a couple reminders that the Gnome King is afraid of chickens, but it still really kind of comes out of nowhere and is really convenient as a way to kind of end the story.
Yeah. I think Chris and I, when we were watching it, I made some joke about like the moment the egg touches like deep inside the Gnome King's belly, he starts to wobble a little bit. I was like, man, it really sucks when a restaurant ignores your dairy allergy or something like that. It's like, yeah, it sucks, man.
From someone who is in fact allergic to eggs. Yeah, it really does suck, but it won't make me crumble into dust. It'll just make me have really bad congestion and brain fog you would not believe.
Yeah.
Actually, since we're talking about the Gnome King, can we just talk about how the Gnome King's like motivation is actually like correct?
Oh yes,
because his whole thing was like, you took my emerald, you colonized my
you stole
land.
The Gnome King says land back.
Yeah, the Gnome King says repatriate.
Yes.
The Elgin marbles. I mean, oops.
I was losing my mind about that last night. I'm like, wait a minute, no, the Gnome King didn't do anything wrong.
Well, I mean,
he did.
His motivation
he did in the same way that
oh my god, he's the flag smashers.
That indigenous villains almost always do in white movies, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like if you look at Black Panther.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's the same criticism, right? It's like, well, he's right, but he took it too far.
Yeah. See, I think
too extreme.
Black Panther is the one time I think it does kind of work, because it is like it's because he has learned the white man's tools that he's wrong.
Yeah. And honestly, I kind of agree, but I've seen a lot of criticism of it from Black media critics, so I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, like I think
like it felt better there. At least Black Panther was like, no, he was right.
See, I think that the thing that frustrated me about it is like, because that reading that is all set up that the problem with Killmonger is that he's using CIA tactics, etc. Except that is undermined by the fact that they then want to treat the CIA guy as a friend, and especially in the second movie, it's like, no, that fucker should be paying for the reason that Killmonger was doing things in the wrong way. He's the reason he's the problem. But like the flag smashers and all
the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, like, but all the other ones, like, there is no nuance at all about the like, they're doing it in the wrong way. But I mean, yeah, you really shouldn't, ally yourself with a head stealing princess.
And you probably shouldn't turn people to stone.
You probably shouldn't turn people into stone or ornaments either. Like that's a little weird. It's a choice.
Also, don't make a small child cry. That's not cool.
And also don't manipulate a small child's promises. Like, that's not cool.
And don't tell the small child it's her fault when you turn her friends into ornaments.
Like,
not cool.
That is straight up abusive.
It is. He's toxic.
Like, let's let his people have all the emeralds and all the rubies back, but he's still got to pay for fucking with a small child and siding with a princess. You should never trust the royalties. Never trust the royals.
Yeah, I wonder what happens in the Gnome Mountain now that the king is dead. Like, gnome revolution? Because, all right.
All the gnomes were being affected by the egg because they were all kind of melting. So I almost feel like they're all like connected somehow.
Maybe. I thought they were just retreating out of horror.
Oh, maybe they were. I got the sense they were, because they all looked like they were just like dissolving or something, like the king was. So I thought they were all poisoned somehow.
Good. Just to return again to the amazing claymation. Oh my goodness,
so good.
Yeah. We'll just have to wait for the version of Wicked that's actually written by Indigenous people to give us a.
Wait, there's a version of Wicked written by Indigenous people? Give it to me.
No,
we're saying
this is thing that should exist.
One day it'll happen.
Because Wicked tries to do that, but it's not written by an Indigenous person, so it. I've read the books. I haven't actually seen the musical.
I loved the book. The first book. I just read the first book. I read that thing through in like a single night. I didn't sleep. And then I just have never wanted to go back. Like, something didn't sit right afterwards.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, I read a couple of the sequels as well. It's definitely trying to grapple with something, but maybe not the right person doing it.
Yeah. Which is not to say that you can never tell stories outside your lane, but get help.
Get help.
From the people whose lane it is.
Yep. Yeah. At least study the lane, learn from the people who made the lane, get their advice. Just saying.
Yeah. But yeah, it'd be interesting to get like someone doing this from the perspective of a gnome. And also, like, we depose the king and the princess and we give a whole nother queen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ozma just shows up in this version. Ozma's significantly more queer in the books. Disguised as a boy for a really long time. I don't remember exactly how that plays out. It's been too long since I read them. But like, I just have this mental image of Ozma as kind of gender fluid. Maybe I just imparted that out of my own wishes. I don't know.
I like
kind of like Zelda, But here it's so interesting because Ozma, like, they foreshadow her plenty, and there's Mombi drops her name and stuff. But she actually appears and comes out when Dorothy uses the most powerful magic to wish that she herself could be in two places at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a strong implication that Ozma is just the imaginary, idealized Dorothy, which gives me strong ick that the girl with brown hair wishes that she were taller and blonde. But
in the books, Dorothy is supposed to also be blonde. But yeah, it does. I think it might be a fun time to talk about parallels to Farscape.
Alrighty.
Well, I think the biggest parallel, of course, is just, or at least the biggest one that jumps out to me is just like the amazing puppetry and how all of those characters feel real, even though many of them are animatronics. Like, the vast majority of this cast is animatronics, and it's so good.
The way that Firuza Balk can be the only human on stage with a bunch of puppets and animatronics, and you don't notice.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
You just accept it. It all becomes seamless. Like
it seems perfectly real.
It really does. It's such a vivid, living being, each one of them, you know, like, especially for me, especially TikTok. Like, TikTok is this big metal hunk, and I just feel like he's real. I want to hug him. Like,
he's adorable. His mustache is perfect.
His little hat, he takes it off for her. I love him.
He's kind of like a wholesome version of Rigel in some ways. I don't know why.
With the mustache.
It's a mustache.
He's small. He's got a mustache. And occasionally things get wound interestingly.
I was thinking of like the Gump as a parallel to Moya and Pilot.
That's what I was thinking, Pilot. Little sarcastic in there.
Yep. Living thing that we fly in, and it comes with a bit of a sarcastic, grumpy head.
Edge. Yep.
I was actually thinking about Dorothy's character in this, and specifically the times when she has opportunities to sort of opt out of the scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then she just puts her back up and ignores people and walks forward. And that felt very John to me.
Yeah.
Well, John is, Dorothy Gale is a big part of John Crichton's DNA. You know, more the first film, definitely. But then there's going to be, spoiler alert, there is going to be a point in the upcoming season in which John actually calls out that he is Dorothy Gale from Kansas.
Just about to say, I'm pretty sure there's an episode where he literally calls himself that. I couldn't remember which season it was, but yeah,
that's adorable.
Yeah. Yep, there's gonna be some parallels to this story coming up in season 4. But we are an unspoiled podcast, so yeah, the most that I will tell you is he does at one point refer to himself as Dorothy Gale from Kansas. So yeah, like, he is Dorothy in so many ways. He's was shot through a tornado wormhole.
Got isekai'd right into that fantasy world full of puppets.
Yep. And being chased by the character who is wants vengeance for their sibling.
Grace. Yeah.
Off and to then, see the wizard.
Scorpius. Yeah, it's interesting. There you can see some parallels definitely with the different characters. You could also argue that TikTok is kind of a combination of Rigel and Dargo, because it's
with the warrior aspect.
Yeah, with the warrior aspect. Yeah.
I mean, I think he's much more of a for the cowardly lion in the first film, but I think there's also Jack Pumpkinhead and TikTok-y vibes to him.
See, I kind of thought the chicken was more of the parallel to the cowardly lion.
No, I was thinking like Dargo to the cowardly lion.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. I got what you're saying.
Yeah. And Chiana is kind of, although he's also got Scarecrow and Jack Pumpkinhead aspects to him.
Oh yeah.
And of course, we know who the Tin Man is, who is searching for her heart that she has all along. Yes. And that's one character who doesn't want to be in two places at once, but certainly was.
And the whole tension about whether or not to go home.
Yes. Ultimately, can you go home again?
Also, I like that because we haven't talked too much about the very end of the movie, other than talking about that woman being in the wagon. I like that Uncle Henry gets a little bit of an arc in this movie. It's very small, but at the beginning, his leg is recovered, but he's still clearly like processing what they've gone through, and the house is unfinished. And then he helps find Dorothy, and it's this big moment, gives her a big hug. And then we cut to like, oh, the house has been finished, and it looks like they're doing okay. They're doing better.
Yeah, and when he finds her, he actually throws his cane away.
Yeah, like he runs up to it's very sweet.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him.
I actually found it a little bit troubling. In that, like, on one hand, it's very possible to read that as like he was so depressed and then he remembered what he had to live for when he found her. But it's also very possible to read that as, oh, there was nothing wrong with him. He just needed to get off his bum and throw away the cane he didn't need. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea that we could be very easily reading this as, oh, people are just malingering once their physical problem is solved. So like it was like so many of the things in this movie, it was ambiguous, but this is one where I would have liked a little bit more of a push towards this cured his depression because he remembered what he had to live for kind of thing, which again, fair. Like,
yeah. Kind of 1985 attitudes about disability.
I try not to impose anachronistic mores on the past, but at the same time, as somebody who spends a lot of time in history, people have always kind of known that you shouldn't be shitty to people.
Yes.
And there's an extent to which, like, we can still look at that and judge it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's whether how much people understand their shittiness, which is sometimes if people have not had access to people telling, particularly to disabled people telling their own stories, people may not understand that the shittiness of the sort of magical cure for disability. I don't want to put anachronistic morals on the past, but I also feel like sometimes the past is important context.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree.
Yeah. And you know, I think the not thinking through the implications of ableism and mental health stuff that you're putting in your children's movie.
Oh, sure.
Wasn't a good idea in the 80s. Is a worse idea now.
Yeah. For sure. I guess what I'm getting at is I find it very interesting in the context of somebody who is proactively interested in the advances in mental health. Like that's what catches my interest here, is because we have the writer and director clearly working with this model of electroshock therapy was bad. And we shouldn't be applying harmful medical techniques to people who don't need it, especially children, right? Like that comes through nice and clear. And so with that awareness, this just kind of hit me over the head as like a place of I think you had done that better.
Overall, there's sort of a lot of really interesting ideas are set up.
Yes.
But there's kind of a rush to conclusion.
Yeah.
And then that, you know, sort of, I looked a little bit into the production history, and there was a lot of trouble in terms of production, and the writer director Murch got fired for a time from the film, and they had to campaign to get him rehired, including like George Lucas had to promise that if he couldn't finish, he would finish, because it was going over budget and there were ballooning production costs and things and that. So there, you know, with Disney at the helm being like, you know, get the thing done. So, you know, you can understand it becomes, you can understand how it happened that, you know, aspects got rushed.
For sure. And like you said, thematically, that does kind of lead to a lot of things touched on and not fleshed out in the way that a child would overhear them but not really understand the bigger picture.
And I think that's why this wasn't a great success with the critics, although they loved the special effects, and the special effects won awards. And it wasn't a big hit at the box office, but had cult following because just like all the other films like this that were made, like there's the same thing with The Labyrinth and the same thing with The Dark Crystal. Parents don't necessarily want to take their kids to the box office, to the cinema to see this stuff, but kids and older kids definitely want to rent it from the video store and then watch it again and again and again, and it becomes a cult hit. And once again, the adults don't always know what kids actually want. And what kids actually want isn't always a good business model.
Also true. I was saying to my friends that I watched this with, this movie was significantly less weird and more coherent than I remembered it.
It flows very well, and it has really good pacing.
Well. Had great pacing. The dialogue all fit very well. Like, it was all very believable. Like, you didn't necessarily always know everybody's motivations, and we've said that there, we've pointed out a couple of places where we would have liked to see more, development, but like, in the end, the things that were story crucial were all laid out very well. They were all
like we got the most important bits of it. The most important bits of information were very much conveyed by the story. It's like, okay, Dorothy ends up back in Oz again. Oz is different. Something has gone horribly wrong. The Gnome King is responsible. She has to get to the Gnome King because that's where the Scarecrow is. Like, you have this very, like, it's a very much a boom, 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 straightforward line. How it does it is very strange and unique, and the aesthetic of it is just so out there, but it works.
Love it.
It's just so fantastical. But like, in terms of the actual storyline, it is very straightforward, actually. And I had kind of a similar experience with it, where it feels like, watching it now, I'm like, oh, okay, I understand the whole story now. Like, I kind of knew it as a kid, but I was a kid and I was watching a movie like this, half of it, because I was so scared, but I kept watching it because it was so visually interesting, and I was just like, what's happening? There's a rock man. Oh my God.
Okay, well, I think that's I think we've talked through enough of Return to Oz. Thank you, Zylla and Mandy. This has been so fun. Such a good discussion. And the next episode of Muppet Sex and Trauma should be Dog with Two Bones, which I don't know about you, Mandy, but that's one of my favorites.
It's a very good episode.
Yeah.
You're on for a treat.
Wait a second. Past me has gotten the schedule a little bit confused there. The actual next episode to be released in the feed will be the two-parter Into the Lion's Den, which Zylla guested on, so you will get another dose of Zylla. And then after that, there will be something else that is yet to be decided, and then Dog with Two Bones. And then we'll have our season 3 wrap up, and then we'll start looking at season 4.
Looking promising.
Yay.
Lots of fun stuff to come.
Oh, yeah.
So, let's go in alphabetical order. Maddie, what is your favorite part of this film?
Ooh, so hard. I think my favorite part is all the faces, because they're all moving and they're looking around, and it's just it's a very seamless effect, all the different faces and taking them out and everything. So I think it's just that moment when we go and we just see all of them. So good.
Zylla?
Oh, well, you kind of took mine, but
sorry.
Backup.
You can have the same one. It's okay. I'll share.
No, like, there's so many great moments in this movie. It's kind of hard to choose anyway. So the other one I was thinking about is when Dorothy is trying to figure out which ornaments to touch. And I love the moment where it like pulls back and we see this huge curio collection that she has no clues as to how to solve, and her decision to say, I'm not just going to try and think my way through this, I'm going to trust this magical realm of Oz and just it'll guide me somewhere. which like isn't said out loud, but like it really felt to me that it was about trusting her intuition that Oz is real, that magic is real. And that puzzle, the puzzle of the ornaments, has stuck in my head more than I think anything else from this film, and has influenced my choices of hobbies, I guess I'll go with. Since now so for a long time I wrote LARPs and would design LARP puzzles, and now I help my partner, who is a professional puzzle constructor, to write puzzle hunts.
Oh, fun.
That's cool.
I think mine is related to that. My favorite part is TikTok's plan. When he
Yes.
when he fakes out the Gnome King and is going to let himself be turned, so just to give Dorothy a clue. I think that's such a great, clever moment. And the self-sacrifice and all. It's good. It's really good.
And it doesn't even work.
Yeah.
It's so sad when it's like when Dorothy's looking at the table, nothing has changed. And like you spend that moment going, wait, do I remember everything was there? Does she remember everything was there? It's like, oh, there's no guarantee that he's on that table.
Mm-hmm.
But one of these things that's not like the other, and it's the big emerald.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So good. I love this movie.
Yes.
It's a great movie. I'm glad we watched it.
And then there's the moment where they think that they lost him, but he's in the metal on Gump's antler.
Yeah, on the antler.
Yeah.
Yeah, another of my favorites, since we're just like talking out from it. Another of my favorites is actually when TikTok has one of the Wheelers and is getting information out of him, and the Wheeler's just like, "You don't want to get on my bad side. I'm a terrible person."
That's a good line. It's very well delivered.
Props to that actor, really. Like,
just. And that guy's mostly a puppeteer. Yes.
Yeah, I gotta say, whenever like I see outlines of AT-ATs from Star Wars, my first thought is always Wheelers. Like that's always what I think.
Maybe that's part of why I find Wheelers so creepy. Is like I remember Star Wars as a kid, and those things always like, so you know they had the evil guys inside of them, so I knew that they were bad. Maybe that's why.
Anything that makes that squeaking sound and then has the like weird face,
the mask.
Oh yeah, those helmet masks were so perfect,
so creepy.
Yeah. They're just absolutely made from nightmare fuel.
They really are.
Yeah. Damn, this film is really creative.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell the folks where they can find you? I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find me over at my own YouTube channel. I am Mainly Mandy. I mostly make video essays about things related to polyamory, but I talk about other things as well. In fact, my next video, which I'm currently working on, is about going no contact with parents and parentification and, tricky, complicated adult relationships with your parents. So it's going to be a heavy one, but it's also honestly probably one of my best scripts I've ever written. So check that out. And you can also follow me on all the most of the social medias at Mainly Mandy, spelled like the state of Maine, because I'm cool like that.
Looking forward to that video.
Thank you.
And you can find me on my channel is Zylla's Athenaeum on YouTube, or Zyll, that's like syllable but with a Z, on Blue Sky and Mastodon, and also on Twitch. I mostly make video essays that are about sort of big political ideas like police abolition or democracy, but I often will specialize down into talking about ancient history and linguistics and occasionally board game media criticism.
Mm-hmm. I am Sara, the Fat Culture Critic. You can find me at the Fat Culture Critic on YouTube, and on the usual places as well. The links are always in the doobly-doo. I have a video that will be out by the time this is out, with me doing as a sort of prompt to other people as well, of talking about the why we fight or why we work, for people in the sort of lefty social justice-y kind of space, like trying to connect with your why, with your motivation, to sort of think that through. So I have that recorded, and I'm working on the edit, and I talk a little bit about Harold and Maude, one of my favorite films of all time. So yes, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you to the folks for tuning in to talk about a really weird film that you should show to your kids, but maybe not super young.
Use your best judgment.
Yeah. Maybe this is for double-digit kids.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay. So, yep, we're going to say bye. Hey, folks.
Bye.
It's not like we got a whole lot of setup for Water Melts the Witch either.
That's true.
True. And that's still one of the funnest scenes in any of that movie.
Melting.